for Views on the News, where we dedicate a little more time to some stories that turned our heads this morning. And joining us to share his thoughts is Matt Driskill, Senior Editor at Reuters News. Welcome, Matt. Good to have you with us.
Good morning.
As always. Now let's start with this story in Singapore's Today Online. After years of pressure, Japan bans possession of child porn. Well, this Asahi Shimbun points out that the ban excludes manga and anime, while the Time magazine says Japan finally bans child pornography. It is the last developed country to do so. And Matt, what's taken Japan so long?
I have absolutely no idea. This is one of those stories where you kind of stop and say, what the heck is going on here? Because you would think that any country, whether it's a developed country or a developing country, would have realized long ago that this is just not something that you need to protect in any way, or that you need to, it's something that should have been done a long time.
There are people arguing against it.
Well, and
not just the publishers. There are political opponents as well.
Well, and I think that is a very weak argument. And I was reading the article this morning, and I'd seen this, come out yesterday on the wires and everything when it happened. And when the gentleman that says that opposition lawmakers said it could lead to curbing free speech. Free speech is not absolute. Okay, in the United States, for example, where free speech is enshrined in the Constitution under the First Amendment. A couple of things. Number one, you got to remember it's just an amendment. It was an afterthought. They didn't put it into the original Constitution. Number two, there have been court cases throughout history. There's sort of a famous one that you learn in journalism school where free speech is not absolute, because you cannot walk into a crowded theater and yell fire, because you're going to cause harm. You're putting people at risk. And I think for anyone, anywhere, to say that we can't ban child pornography because it's going to curb free speech, they're crazy.
It's a strange argument to have to put your hand up and try and defend that, isn't it? I mean, how...
if I was one of the publishers or one of these opposition lawmakers that said, no, we have to protect the rights of free speech, I wouldn't be able to show my head in public, show my face in public. I mean, it's just a ridiculous thing to argue that we should be able to create this, or that we should be able to possess it, because I think the production and all of that was outlawed in 1999, according to the article. But for them to say I mean, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's one of those things that's so bad that it's ridiculous to even make the argument.
And they've drawn the line as well. They haven't gone all the way. They've said that it can still be, depictions in comics, animation, computer graphics, manga, which is a very popular form of entertainment over there as well.
I used to go to Japan once a month back in the late 90s on business, and you would see things that are out there. But again, I mean, to me, it's a very common sense argument. It's wrong. Don't do it. Don't possess it. Don't abide it. Don't
tolerate it.
Don't tolerate it, because it's wrong.
Yeah.
So you think it should be extended as well into animation?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The Justice Minister actually says we must fight against the tendency of looking at children as sexual objects, and I think that's ultimately the most important thing. But the people who are opposing this, how much of it could be put down to cultural differences, perhaps? Because at the end of the day, it's a little bit about what the public's appetite is, what they're willing to accept, and perhaps it is different in Japan to the rest of the world.
I don't think that being culturally attuned is the problem here, because you have child pornography in the United States, you have child pornography in Europe. I don't think it's a cultural thing. I think it's just a bad thing, and it should be outlawed. It's one of those things, and believe me, I'm not a prude, I'm not a puritanical Christian or anything like that.
I don't think anyone would accuse you of being that.
But this is just one of those things that is so wrong and so bad that it just should not be tolerated in any form whatsoever.
Well, like the Today Online article says, some of the things out there are so depraved they aren't worth defending. So you would
absolutely
agree with that. What do you make, though, of the fine? You can be imprisoned for up to a year and fined up to a million yen or $10,000. Is it a harsh enough penalty? I mean, Japan is known as an international hub for the production and trafficking of child pornography. How intent do you think the government is on changing its reputation?
Based on the fine, not very intent, and I don't think they're taking it very seriously. I think, it sounds to me like it's one of those things that they did because they had to. and that's fine. We'll do it. We'll go on the record as being opposed to it, and we'll put a little fine in there. We'll throw them a bone, and it's okay. You know, we've outlawed it. We've got fines. What more do you want? I think they could have done more.
What do you say about this then? There's a quote from Daisuke Okeda. He's from Japan Animation Creators Association, and he says the new law was to protect children from abuse, and that banning animation would not satisfy the goal of the law. So he's still trying to hold on to the rights of the animators.
Well, the animators and the guys that are producing this are simply trying to protect their jobs, their money, their cash flow, and that's it.
And their argument is that obviously because it's animation, because it's manga, that no children are being harmed.
Fine, but you still have, you're putting these things in the minds of people that it's okay to think about this, to objectify it and all of that. You know, again, whether it's cartoons or whether it's just the subject matter is so serious that it's just something, I don't see how you can make the argument that it's okay to do it in any form.
Yeah. All right, well, we do have to move on to our next story. We're looking at a survey next conducted by ThomsonReuters. ThomsonReuters INSEAD survey, Q2 2014 Asia Business Sentiment. It says Asia's top companies reported a bullish outlook in the second quarter of 2014 despite worries over the global economy. And interestingly, none reported a negative outlook for the first time in the survey's history. I think the thing that surprised me the most, Matt, was Thailand has gone from a negative to positive. Did that surprise you?
Absolutely. Well, I was surprised by the jump in the survey and the index reading itself, which went from 64 to 74, which is quite a big jump. And actually, I put this survey together. It's one of my projects at Reuters that I do. And I was surprised because I was looking at the data. I think that's the first time since 2012 that we had such a big jump. And it was the last time we had the last time the reading was that high was in the first quarter of 2012. And yeah, you see, and India got a big jump as well. But Thailand went from a negative last quarter, a 41 reading, to a 91 reading, which is a huge jump. And you think, well, my gosh, what's going on? They've had riots, they've had political difficulties, a coup d'etat.
It's not even had, it's still ongoing.
Still ongoing. Then, the Army Council for Peace and Reconciliation, or whatever it's called, they're doing, I think the thing that they are doing is trying to pump up the economy, and people see that as a good thing.
So what's accounting for the jump?
I think that's it. It's people are, business people, they like certainty. And when the Army steps in and says, this is what we're going to do, you can be certain about it, then business people like that. I mean, you see people doing businesses with dictators because they know who's in charge. And democracy gets kind of messy sometimes with all these rights.
It's not a great advertisement for democracy, is it?
No, it's not. But businesses, I mean, what's the old famous saying about buying stocks? You buy when there's blood on the street because the prices are going to be low. So, I'm joking around a little bit and being a little bit cynical, but people see the Army coming in as giving them some certainty, at least for what's going to be happening in the next quarter or the next 6 months. And so for the next 6 months, they're like, okay, good. We can count on these guys. We know what they're going to do. We know who's in charge. And we can do business.
Well, speaking of that certainty, perhaps no surprises that India turned 100% reading, had a reading that was positive of 100%.
Yeah, India went up to 100%, tied with the Philippines, which for the second quarter in a row was at a reading of 100 as well. In India, according to the people we talked to when we did some interviews for the story, it was basically an election bump. The Modi government is seen as being more business friendly. People believe that the government is going to come in, is going to put in some pro-business policies. And so they're very, very positive about that.
Just very quickly, you also say in this report, it also says the sentiment spike may be short-lived. Explain to us why.
Because, and I love India. It's one of my favorite countries. I've been there. I've done business there in the past. But India, like the United States, and again, talking about democracy, it suffers from democracy. India, dealing with the government, it is such a large place, such a large bureaucracy, as well. The bureaucratic nightmares to do anything in India are just horrendous. And that's one of the problems. I personally don't know how much the Modi government is going to be able to come in and wipe the slate clean and say, okay, this is how we're, if you want to set up a factory, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Because there are lots of entrenched interests that are there, that have been there for a long time and that know how to play the system, and it's not going to be easy to just go in and do wholesale changes. And so that's why I think it may be short-lived, because they're going to find that you can't just snap your fingers and make things go your way in India.
Okay, well, talking of snapping fingers and seeing how things can go their way, let's turn to our last article. It's from the online portal news.com.au and with job interview advice. The headline, Workshops, Jamie Kwong reveals how the water test works in a job interview. Just to explain, Workshop is a boutique advertising firm, and here's how the water test works. The candidate is given a glass of water at their interview, and when it ends, as everyone is getting up to leave the room, the interviewer will pick up his or her own glass and look to see if the candidate does the same. In a nutshell, it's to see if the candidate is polite and considerate, or if they're the type of person who leaves things behind for others to clean up. Matt, have you ever lost or gotten a job based on a glass of water? Seems like a lot at stake for something so trivial.
No, but if you look at my resume, it looks like I rode with Jesse James and his gang, because I've had a few jobs in my time. But, I mean, these kinds of things where they do all these little tests, they sort of crack me up, and then they sort of annoy me a little bit. Because, but actually it's one reason why if I go into a job interview, I don't drink coffee or I don't drink water or anything like that. I'm just there to talk and to do that. But I noticed
that's the key to getting around the water test.
That's the key to getting around.
No, thank you. Yeah.
But it's funny because I think this Workshop is kind of a brand agency or consultancy or something like that. And I have some familiarity with working with people like that, and they always come up with these kinds of gimmicks. How to build your brand and so on and so forth, which is fine. But these little gimmicks like this, to me, it's a little bit annoying, but I'm not a big fan of all the HR policies and things that you have to go through as well.
It's not just these kind of policies. Like I've heard even like for Oxford universities or big like public schools in the UK and things like that, they'll have you walk into a room, the professor chucks a rugby ball at you. If you drop it, you don't get in. If you catch it, you can sit down for the interview. If you throw it back, you pass.
But what happens if you have a glass of water in your hand when he throws it at you and you spill it?
Well, if you catch it and you have a glass, you get a scholarship.
Full ride.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks so much for coming and speaking to us today, Matt. Matt Driskill from Reuters News, sharing his thoughts on views on the news. Now, still ahead here on First Look Asia, we look at how Asian markets will react to the latest Fed meeting when they open today. Stay with us.